Hello and welcome into Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange, and I'm alongside Charlie Palullo, Josh Jordan. Read their work on sportsmap.com. Follow them on X at Palullo, and at Josh Jordan 975. Click like on the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. The bell for notifications. If you're on the go, check us on Apple and Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast app is. Gents, look, this game was an ugly game. Houston has dominated this Jags series as of late, but they've all, or I shouldn't say all, but a lot of them have just been some really ugly games. Today, no different. Look, run game continues to be a big nothing. Another game with more laundry on the field than my wife's side of the closet. Third straight game with double-digit penalties and almost 100 yards in penalties surrendered. For a team that has had big aspirations for this season, they absolutely cannot continue to be this sloppy. It's insane in a game in which CJ Stroud goes 27 of 40, 345 yards, 2 touchdowns. And yet this was almost an L for Houston. You could probably say should have been an L for Houston. Jits, I'm gonna just toss to you. What are you seeing out of this Texans offense that has just made it just so challenging this season?
All right, first off, apology if you pick up any sort of stink. It was a mad hot dash to the parking lot to be able to get here. Time of appointed rounds. This isn't college football. There is no selection committee. Style points mean nothing. Margin of victory means nothing. It's how many W's do you bank? So the Texans 3-1 on a day where the Colts get to 2-2. The Jaguars can join the Titans in the also-rans category. So while a thing of beauty, a work of art, no, but winning ugly beats losing pretty every freaking time in the NFL. The offense for long stretches of the game was ugly. The third quarter, it basically did nothing. They have to stop the dead ball stuff. Hey, Laramie Tunsil managed to know the snap count in this game, but gets called for holding a couple of times, including on a run play, basically, which to me is inexcusable. If you're a tackle and you need to pull down a pass rusher to protect CJ Stroud, that's one thing. But when you're caught, when it's a catch and run or just a running play, to me, that's just dumb football. And, do we go after the O-line coach? Do we go after D'Amico Ryans? But the rash of penalties, they look like the Raiders over the last 20 years where they can't help themselves. And, hey, Steven Sims, if he didn't get cut Monday morning, I'm not saying it'll be a mistake, but game one, he lets a punt drop, cost him 20 yards of field position. Last week, he signals fair catch and then runs after catching the ball, which was not a penalty, but just, hey, know the rules. And then, of course, the early muff, giving Jacksonville a 2-yard touchdown drive, basically after that. And any unsportsmanlike penalty call because, he didn't do anything colossally stupid. So the celebration of me, I'm going to act like a jackass. So the Texans aren't good enough that they can continually commit double-digit penalties. The X factor when you're against an inferior team, you give up a cheap score or a big play, a special teams gaffe. But sigh relief, CJ Stroud gets a winning drive, and Nico Collins is increasingly looking like a steal at $24 million per year in his contract extension.
Yeah, I mean, every phase, they were severely challenged today. I guess maybe Fairbairn did okay. I'll give him some credit, but the Sims on special teams, it just kills you with that muff punt early in the game. On defense, they struggled again against the run. Tank Bigsby at 90 yards on 7 carries. Lassiter had some issues in coverage today. Christian Kirk was just killing Petrie for most of this game. That was a mismatch. That was difficult. And if Trevor Lawrence could just put a little touch on a deep pass every now and then, oh my Lord, this game would have gotten out of hand really quickly. They were very fortunate that he kept missing throws. CJ missed a throw or two. He had a possible touchdown to Nico that he missed early in the game. But, when all the cards were on the table, he got it done at the end, and that's what CJ can do. But man, Bobby Slowick, is there anything else in this offense besides Nico Collins running crossing routes? I mean, that's all they really have. And I thought with Tank Dell out this week, like maybe they'll throw to the running back some more. Maybe they'll throw to the tight ends. Dalton Schultz, it's like he barely played. He had a big catch there at the end, but he didn't do much. So it was it was great that they won. I'm very happy, but I'm sure, like you guys, I was anticipating a loss and thinking of all the things that we were going to have to talk about from this game that they got to get cleaned up. But my other big comment, I was talking to Brandon before we went on. If you told me Will Anderson didn't play today, I probably would have believed you. I didn't see him doing anything. Him and Hunter, they hardly did anything the whole game. They can't get – last week they were getting pressure, but they couldn't get the quarterback on the ground. This week they really couldn't get any pressure. So it's nice to hopefully clean this stuff up with the win. But the penalties, like D'Amico can't keep shrugging this off. Every week they're having double-digit penalties.
To follow on the offense, I think it's increasingly clear their guards are a problem. Shaq Mason has not played well, and game 4 didn't improve his season's resume. Kenyon Green is only starting because they evidently don't have anybody better. I wondered when they drafted Blake Fisher with Tunsil, the $25 million per year left tackle, and Titus Howard, I'm a right tackle, and being paid big money to be a right tackle, with the possibility to be there for Fisher to move inside in just getting who you judge to be your 5 best offensive linemen on the field as a unit. Maybe that's something they need to get a little more earnest in exploring. One qualifier about the offense, again, no Joe Mixon. And Cam Akers was more effective today against Minnesota, which isn't saying much, but, with one little gash run of double digits, he winds up at 4 yards per carry. But they have too many 0 and negative plays. Without Mixon in the running game, that's a big blow.
Well, it's crazy looking at the stats because you wouldn't have thought it by watching it, but they did reach north of 100 rushing yards in this game for the first time since week 1. Josh and I had to go look at the box score just to see, like, where did that come from? 17 of it was from CJ Stroud rushing. Look, Josh, to your point, I don't know where this team would be without Nico Collins right now, or actually, I think that was Charlie's point. I'm sure Josh shares it. On defense, it was Josh that said the secondary was not good, and had Trevor Lawrence had any sort of accuracy at all, this would have been a insurmountable lead for Jacksonville. But that being said, credit where it's due. Huge goal line stop on 4th down that prevented this game from getting out of hand and allowed for the Texans to be able to make that comeback. I guess, like looking at stepping back at the big picture, we thought going into the season, this team was going to be one thing. We thought it was going to be this high-powered offense. We have yet to see, outside of the Colts game, a really high-powered offense. Do we really even know who this team is right now? Because they've struggled against the Bears. They've struggled against the Jags, got completely blown out by Minnesota. But considering they continue to put themselves behind the 8 ball with penalties, 3 weeks in a row now, do we know who this team is yet in this 2024 season early?
No, I think there are probably 25, 26 of the 32 teams that you can basically throw in a barrel. You have a couple at the real high end, and then you have a couple at the real low end. Of course, the Jaguars look to be one of those teams, and the Texans needed to pull it out in the last 18 seconds to beat that team. But oftentimes in life, it's if, not how. And so 3-1, for years it was the quarter poll of the season, but now with 17 games, it's the 23.5% poll, which just lacks the cachet in talking about it. The Texans aren't accomplished enough that the idea that, they were peeking ahead to Buffalo next Sunday, or that would be ridiculous in reality, and I think ridiculous in practice. I don't think that had anything to do with it. It was a division game coming off getting curb stomped in Minnesota. And the Texans, they're not full yet, but of course, it's not like they're the only team missing multiple starters. Let's hope Danico Autry is refreshed and not set back by having his system cleaned out, missing 6 weeks. That is one more weapon for their pass rush in the interior of their defensive line when he gets back 2 games from now. But you just look around the league, the Steelers had been undefeated. Well, the Colts beat them. Those Vikings got a little hairy for them at the end, but they were walloping the Packers at Lambeau for a lot of that game. They're now 4-0. So I think if you're the Texans or a Texans rooter, hey, you're 3-1. No reason to be fat and happy about it. This is not an elite team as currently constituted or what it has achieved, but it's not like they've gotten left in the starting gate. They clearly have the upper hand in this division, and just evolve as the season goes along and get better, starting with that offensive line.
I think we do know this about them. This team can't run the football. And even when it's clearly not working, Slowick does not want to get away from it. And even the commenters or, the announcers were saying like the way they're approaching the offense here towards the end of the game, now they kept running the ball and not getting anything out of it. They're like, guys, there's only so much time left. Like you got to give CJ the ball and let him throw it and try and win the football game. Eventually they did, but I mean, it came really close to the end there. And I think another big takeaway, not only can they not run, they're a team that constantly puts CJ Stroud in a bad position by being behind the sticks with these long second and third downs because of all these penalties. There was that one drive where Agumbawale had the big play on 3rd and 18 or whatever, but they didn't even score on that drive. That drive was 1st and 20, 2nd and 20, 3rd and 18, 2nd and 20. And then I think it went to 3rd and 20 after that. I mean, CJ can't keep bailing you out like that. So they have to get this figured out. They have to. Tunsil, finally, the fans were booing him today. You were there, Charlie. Did you hear some of that throughout the game?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. At least the one false start was not committed by Tunsil, or it would have gotten real nasty. At 3-1, there's no reason to hold your nose about where the Texans are. But they don't look like an elite contender at this point, which is okay as long as they can move that ball in the right direction. I would just have the concern that with that offensive line, unless Fisher factors into the mix, how does it get better? I'm not at all a believer in Kenyon Green at this point. Injuries, poor conditioning, whatever went into his first 2 years. Now that he's playing, he has not played well. Okay, it's just 4 games. Maybe he can improve through midterm, and by the time the final exam comes along, he's an okay left guard. But to me, that would seem to be his ceiling. And Shaq Mason has touched upon a little bit in the preview this week. I don't know if he is, tumbled over that hill toward decline, but he is not graded out well either. So it's just a reality the Texans are going to have to deal with. But, on CJ Stroud, it was one ball that maybe should have been intercepted. But even when under pressure, Minnesota flustered him some, and CJ didn't have a very good game. But other than that, he continues to be about as turnover-proof as there is for an NFL quarterback. And for a guy just 4 games into his second season, that is so stout.
If football is one of the trenches, which is the saying, Houston has to be concerned about their viability for this season because so far, especially on defense, just unable to get pressure on the quarterback when rushing 4. But unfortunately, though, it's tough to bring the house when you have so many issues on secondary as well, outside of Stingley, who's a very, very good defender. What does D'Amico need to do to prioritize fixing on defense between this week and next to put them in a position to not get completely, we don't want to get too far into the preview that will come on Thursday, but what do they need to fix from week to week to not get their doors blown off of them by the Bills?
Now, you mentioned a key issue, right? And D'Amico Ryans was not a high blitzing defensive coordinator, right? Head coach, they have a defensive coordinator in title, but D'Amico Ryans calls the defensive signals. They sent 6 at Trevor Lawrence a fair amount of the time. I think that was they felt they needed to send extra heat, and they didn't believe in Trevor Lawrence's accuracy to be able to beat them. If they could move him off his spot or force him to make challenged throws. Well, Josh Allen's a different creature. Also, by the way, the best running quarterback in the NFL, not named Lamar Jackson. Texans play a good amount of zone, and so the offense sometimes can just dictate matchups there. But where Lawrence missed Christian Kirk for a touchdown, I don't want a safety singled up running deep with the other team's speed receiver, and it was Kalen Bullock that was beaten badly on that play. It was amusing to me that late consecutive plays, it was Jalen Petrie and Eric Murray who were involved in breakups. Neither of those guys you want to make much of a living asking them to do real good work in coverage. But very few teams have the perfect defense. But if you can't apply consistent pressure with 4, it compromises you in other areas. There's no getting around that. Speaking of 4, Christian Harris eligible to rejoin this team. That is a boost to the linebacking core. And we referred to Autry joining 2 games from now.
And that might be it, right? Getting Autry in there, just some fresh legs, somebody else to rotate in there. And because D'Amico's going to have guys in the area, but you got to get the quarterback hurried. You got to get him on the ground. They gave a ton of money to Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. They have a lot invested in him. And those, we'll have to go back and look at the tape. I don't know how much they were getting double teamed. I'm just reacting off the TV copy there, but they're counting on those guys to be able to win some one-on-one matchups. And it's just not happening as often as we hoped it was going to happen this year. So, and the other thing just on offense, you got to spread the ball around a little bit more. Why did you pay Dalton Schultz all this money if you're not going to use it?
Is it a matter of the pressure that CJ is under, where he's not, we saw so many times, and a couple times today where he had some beautiful improv plays where it looks like he should have been down or looks like this play should have been over. He hangs around long enough to find a guy. Although we saw a couple times that led to illegal man downfield calls because the offensive line was not cognizant of what was happening in the backfield. But it seems like, Nico's his safety blanket. It's a security blanket when he needs to find that play. But how much of this is scheme and how much of this is just personnel?
I think Nico Collins is barging down the door of the elite class. I think the top 4 wide receivers in football are Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Justin Jefferson. There's not another one that I would say, oh, yeah, you have to place him ahead of Nico Collins in the moment or on body of work. Stephon Diggs is okay as a number 2. He was never a speed merchant. Maybe he's lost a half step, but, as a possession receiver, he could be John Taylor to Nico Collins as Jerry Rice. If you have a number 1 target who's just a freaking animal, CeeDee Lamb is going to get many more targets than any other Cowboy receivers. I want it that way with Nico. And even when Tank Dell gets back, that shouldn't change much because Tank Dell, while he offers you that speed component, he's not a guy who can win the jump balls. He's not going to, out physical a defender. Nico Collins is the complete package. Feed the beast.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's different this year because Diggs is usually in there on 2 wide receiver sets. So Tank's very often only on the field when there's 3 receivers. That is when he's healthy. So you don't have a lot of those deep shots to Tank when you just have 2 receivers on the field like you had last season. With Diggs and with Nico, they're kind of doing things differently. So, Tank had that ability to kind of get deep on you. And I don't know if Diggs really has that in his bag of tricks anymore. It feels like he's more of an intermediary type receiver. So we'll have to see. Somebody else has to step up. Mechie got to play today. I think he had 1 catch. Hutchinson didn't really do. I feel like they got to find somebody else or get the ball to the running backs. We saw Ogunbowale make some guys miss and get some chunk plays. That's what, running backs can do in the open field. And, as much as I liked what I saw from Akers in the preseason, it's just kind of whatever right now. It's not terrible. Akers specifically, the run game's terrible, but Akers isn't terrible. He's just okay. He's kind of a guy at this point. He had some decent runs today, but, I hate to say Joe Mixon is that big a difference maker. I mean, he's a 28-year-old running back that's kind of coming towards the end, but he looked amazing in week 1. And we talked about this over and over again. Was that because the Colts are just that bad, or was Mixon that much better at reading his blocks and making plays? Hopefully we'll find out next week against the Bills, but this was a great one to win because they should at least, I would think, be underdogs next week. The Bills look like they're ready to win the Super Bowl. So good thing the Texans got that win this week against the Jags. And I wonder if this will be, the Jags coach, Doug Peterson, is he going to get fired after this game? You go 0-4, it's hard to overcome that.
Yeah, the Jaguar season's over. One team in NFL history is rebounded to make the playoffs from 0-4. And even with the extra team added 4 years ago, Jaguars, it's just not happening for them. But, in the AFC, here's the list of teams that are 3-1 or better. The Bills, the Steelers, the Texans, the Chargers pending their game, but still no one takes the Chargers seriously as a top-tier team. So just slap those W's on the wall and work on what you at least have the wherewithal to get better. What I think they want to be and should be their most used offensive set. It's obviously Stroud at the helm, the 5 offensive linemen, 1 running back, Mixon, 3 wide receivers, Collins, Diggs, and Dell. So the so-called skill position guys, 2 of the 5 out, Mixon and Dell. So we shouldn't expect them, I guess, to be playing elite ball when they're down 2 key cogs. And Mixon's not an elite back, but he is their best back. So how can they not be better when they have him?
Yeah, and on Akers, it just goes to show you how the preseason really means nothing because he looked so shifty and fast in the preseason, and then in the regular season against ones, I mean, it looked like he was running in quicksand at times. It looked like anyone could catch him on the field. It probably also helps too to run north and south and not so much east and west as he was doing at times. We did predictions before this game. Charlie, you predicted 20-13. I predicted 27-20. Josh, you were closer, 27-24 on your predictions. I mean, obviously, Vegas, to your point, still hasn't really figured out this Texans team, but thankfully they do continue to win straight up in these games, but they do not cover. So it's also why I don't gamble. Before we're out the door, give me your MVPs from this game, or MVP from this game.
Can you have two broken records if it always seems to be Stroud or Collins? I will go with Nico Collins. What he finished with, 11 or 12 for $151.
Yeah.
And he's their go-to guy. He's the break glass and throw here, and if in case of emergency guy. The opposition knows it, and he still is nearly to 500 yards receiving already, 4 games into the season.
Yeah, just to Charlie's point, to not always pick either CJ or Nico. How about Foley Fatukasi? He was the one that tackled Trevor Lawrence there when they were going for it on 4th down, and that probably would have put the game out of reach. He was going against his former team right there. So big play to get Trevor Lawrence on the ground, keep that from being a touchdown, give the Texans a chance to come back and win this game, and they were able to do it.
I'll go with Ngubawale here, just because I don't want to be redundant with you guys. I'll go Ngubawale, even though, that 34-yard catch on 3rd and 18 was ended up being for naught because they ended up having to punt because of the illegal shift that put them back that far, and then the Tunsil hold and then the sack subsequently after that. So they didn't get, but it seemed like they were kind of getting something going. And then in that final drive, Ngubawale has a couple of runs and then that touchdown catch to put them ahead and win the game. So I'll go with the Ngubawale here. Pretty versatile guy, for a guy who we first saw him last season as a replacement kicker when Fairbairn went down. So a guy who's just had some gone from really just a special teams guy to being a guy who's had some big moments on this team over the past couple of years. So I kind of like that story. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. And we'll be back on Thursday with a preview of Bills Texans. And then if you are a Astros fan, the 3 of us will be doing live reactions to every game of the wild card series between do we know, Charlie, who the Astros play for the wild card series? I haven't even looked today. I was out of town.
Not quite at this hour, but
okay.
In all likelihood, the Royals.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it looks like the Royals at this point. So we will be breaking down that series, whoever the opponent may be. That starts on Tuesday. So make sure you're back here watching us live on YouTube on our other channel, Sports Map Houston. And until we see you then, go Texans.